Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is John Wettenhall. I'm the director of the new George Washington University Museum and Textile Museum that's scheduled to open next March here in Washington, D.C. But I'm here today representing the American Alliance of Museums, where I've served on its board of directors since 2007. We often talk about museums as essential educational institutions, engines of economic activity and tourism, and anchors for the quality of life in their communities. And that's rightfully so. But today, we are here to talk about something that may be new to many of you, and that's museums and public diplomacy. Museums teach us about the rich mosaic of world cultures, making the foreign seem familiar. This often happens through loans and exhibitions, from paintings to prehistoric fossils to panda bears, supported by the scholarship of museum professionals in the US and around the world. But while objects alone can be powerful, they can become so much more compelling when matched with the power of face-to-face interactions among people of diverse backgrounds. It's this ability to bridge cultural divides that makes museums such strong partners in conducting the State Department's essential work in cultural diplomacy. The understanding that everyday citizens can often serve as the best representatives of their countries inspired the creation of the Museums Connect program in 2007. Museums Connect enables U.S. and non-U.S. museums to design partner projects that address a common need. This year alone, participants will be tackling such critical issues as animal habitat and biodiversity research, social justice, climate change, environmental conservation, addressing stereotypes and prejudices, and affirming cultural identity. And as director of a textile museum just a few metro stops from here, allow me to call out one project entitled By the Work of Their Hands, that will focus on fabric arts in both Morocco and the United States. In each of these ventures, members, often youth, travel with the staff of collaborating museums to their partners' countries where they spend time at work and at play and seeing the world through each other's eyes. As one past participant recalled, when you came to visit, we did the awkward thing. But by the time you left, we were friends. So then when we came to visit you, we had friends, but now we are leaving with a family. That's what Museums Connect is all about, and we will share many more stories like that today. I'm pleased now to introduce our next speaker from our partner at the U.S. Department of State, Bruce Armstrong. Bruce is director of the Office of Citizen Exchanges in the State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, where he and his team oversee nearly 80 exchange programs of all kinds. He has previously served the United States at posts in Berlin, Manila, Bern, Bonn, and Budapest. He's looking for another B. Please welcome Bruce Armstrong.
I have a question. Is this to talk, or are you just talking to him?
So, good afternoon. It's great to be here. It's really exciting for me personally to be able to participate in this event and learn more about the programs that are going to be happening, the projects that are going to be happening this time around with this terrific program. First thing I want to do is ask, are there any congressional staffers with us thus far? Well, I hope that some will be dropping by, and so if they do, let me just say in advance, we really appreciate their presence, and we know that they have very busy schedules, and we appreciate any time that they can make for us in those schedules. I also want to give a major thanks to our partner in this program, the American Alliance of Museums, for coordinating this event and all that they do to make Museums Connect happen, because clearly without you all, there would be no program. I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you in the course of the afternoon and at the reception. It's a great opportunity for me personally, I think for all of us, to learn more about the impact that these programs are having at the local level, both abroad and here in the United States. You all have been invited here this afternoon to hear directly from alumni and supporters of Museums Connect. But I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk to you briefly about the role of the State Department, and specifically that of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, ECA, as we call ourselves, in supporting this valuable initiative. The mission of ECA is very straightforward. It's easy to put in a sentence. It's to advance U.S. foreign policy priorities through international, educational, and cultural programs that build mutual understanding. There you have it. And the mutual understanding part comes from Senator Fulbright, and it's a very basic concept and a simple concept, but like certain things, basic, simple, and brilliant. And it's something that we still take very, very seriously. With funding from Congress, we offer, that is to say ECA offers, a broad range of academic, professional, cultural, and youth exchange programs, and that's a total of more than 140 programs bureau-wide in over 190 countries. So we're talking about really a truly global operation. Museums Connect is a terrific example of a cultural diplomacy program. So one of the types of programs that we do. And in my view, it clearly demonstrates the continued relevance of cultural exchanges. And this goes beyond just sort of phrases and the typical things that we say at events like this, because it is a fact that there are people who seriously question cultural exchanges. They find them squishy, they find them old-fashioned, they just don't understand the relevance of them. And certainly for us in ECA, and for me personally, this is a point of view that we do battle with every day, because we are utterly convinced of both the relevance of cultural exchanges and their importance, and the fact that day in, day out, they contribute tremendously to connections between Americans, citizens of the United States, and citizens of countries all around the world. And in doing that, in establishing those connections, they are of tremendous benefit to the United States, and we certainly hope also a benefit to countries around the world. The projects that are made possible by Museums Connect are innovative, museum-facilitated exchanges that foster mutual understanding, that phrase again, by focusing on important 21st century topics. So we're talking about topics that are really important to the age that we live in, not something from a bygone era. Topics like climate change, women's empowerment, disability awareness, and civic engagement. I think we can all agree that those kinds of topics are incredibly important now. This is not something from an earlier era, they're important now. The projects that Museums Connect enable link U.S. communities and communities abroad. They include hundreds of direct participants every year, but the program's impact goes well beyond that. Since every participant belongs to a community and has a network of contacts, and since many of the projects, really most of them, garner significant media coverage, the actual reach of the program every year is in the thousands and well beyond that. With the latest cohort of Museum Connect's participants who are represented here today, the program has involved 25 U.S. states, so half of all U.S. states, and 45 nations. So I think that's a pretty impressive track record, and certainly one that we want to see to continue and keep going and keep improving in enlarging those numbers. These people-to-people and institutional partnerships form the basis of a continuing dialogue between the United States and citizens of countries all around the world. And we see the beginnings of those dialogues right now, right here in this room. For concrete examples, let's look at some of the Museums Connect exchanges from the past year, and I'll offer just 3 examples. In Malaysia and San Francisco, youth from immigrant, refugee, and Muslim communities explored symbols of identity and, using their newfound knowledge, created new multimedia representations of national, cultural, and personal identity to share with each other and with their communities. In Pittsburgh, teenagers worked with their counterparts in Quito, Ecuador, to tackle the environmental challenges facing their urban environments by creating green spaces and urban gardens for underserved residents. And then a third example in St. Paul, Minnesota, very close to my heart, it's where my son lives. Young women from underrepresented communities partnered with young women in Jerusalem to investigate the subtext of clothing in their regions, culminating with garments designed by the participants to reflect their own unique identities. I mean, the key thing of all those examples, obviously, you have people, and primarily young people, coming into contact with each other, forming connections that they would not otherwise have. Why did these connections happen? Because of this program. This year, we look forward to collaborative projects in, and I just love these combinations. I love reading this. Philadelphia and Morocco, Chicago and Cambodia, King City, California and Honduras, Miami and Jamaica, Charleston, West Virginia and Romania, Perkasie, Pennsylvania and China. I think I messed up the name again. Who's from there? Tell me again how you say it right. Perkasie. I did look it up though, and I know what it means. It comes from an Indian word that means the place where hickory nuts are cracked. So I didn't get the pronunciation right, but I at least tried. Raleigh, North Carolina, and both Mexico and India, Philadelphia and Mongolia, and Minneapolis and Colombia. I mean, how cool is this? I mean, this is really today's world. These kinds of connections, these Chicago and Cambodia, Charleston, West Virginia and Romania. I mean, any one of these things is just exciting in and of itself. These projects will enable not only the participants, but also their successors to have strong international networks. Working on an issue of common interest, whether it is strengthening civil society, empowering women and girls, tackling environmental issues, or engaging at-risk youth, is a powerful way to build resilient communities and bridges of understanding between people. So thank you all for your interest in this program and for your participation in this program. And congratulations to those selected to participate in the latest edition of Museums Connect. I look forward to continuing the conversation this afternoon and this evening and for a long time in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bruce. I'd now like to introduce our panelists, all representing the Museum Connect program. Michelle Lopez is former manager of Art Access Programs and Autism Initiatives, an award-winning program that serves visitors with special needs at the Queens Museum in New York. Michelle has served children and families affected by autism as an instructor, counselor, and trainer, and as an advocate for the arts through professional development and art programming with both New York City and Long Island schools. Michelle is joined by her community partner, Jacqueline Moore. Welcome.
Thank you.
Chanel Compton is Director of Education for the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center and is herself an artist and arts educator. In 2011, she was selected as the U.S. Department of State's Cultural Envoy, where she created murals with community youth and artists in cities throughout Brazil. Chanel is joined by her community partner, Brianna Rather. And I'm now going to turn the program over to our moderator, Stacy White. Stacy is the Cultural Programs Division Chief in the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which develops, coordinates, and directs the implementation of cultural exchange programs in the arts and humanities worldwide in support of U.S. foreign policy objectives. During her distinguished diplomatic career, she has served in a variety of cultural, press, and public affairs positions in Washington, D.C., and at U.S. embassies in Canada, Finland, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, and Panama. Please welcome Stacy White and her wonderful guests.
Well, this morning I was so inspired to listen to all of you as you started your conversations. Actually, that we got to overhear the conversations that have been going on for a while now, that you were notified of your partnerships and you're starting this great adventure. And one of the things that you said this morning was, wouldn't it be great if we could compare knowledge and learn about some of the things that have already happened, how we can sort of see what's out there and not reinvent the wheel for some of our projects and looking for similarities. So this panel today is going to be an opportunity for you to learn from some of the projects that have just taken place over the last year, as we sort of hear about their successes and their journey and how they started, like all of you in those seats today, and concluded up here to tell us about their adventures along the way. But before we start, I want to just also tell the story visually, because Ben has got a little video to share with us about the Museums Connect project that AAM put together. Thank you.
Stories about the Museum Connect programs are really goosebump material because they're so exciting and they're so unique. Museums are community institutions. Museums Connect is part of that effort. It's part of supporting museums in their work to strengthen communities, here and abroad.
Since 2007, Museums Connect has funded international museum partnerships in 26 states and the District of Columbia, reaching 45 countries. This unique program has touched more than 400 community organizations and 250,000 people. Museums Connect is supported by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Museums Connect is administered by the American Alliance of Museums.
At AAM, we are absolutely convinced that museums from around the world can learn from each other, that there are opportunities for mutual learning, for collaborations, for sitting down together and thinking about new ways to address community issues. And that's all about what we're doing here at AAM, is trying to develop that global museum community.
I did warm up to the idea of the cultural exchange, and I found it really fascinating. You really can't judge a country by one story or one newspaper article that you read.
Before joining this program, I don't know anything about Malaysia. So yeah, after participating in the program, I think Malaysia is pretty cool, diverse. So people speak many languages.
We compared the differences in the night skies, and the really awesome part of the entire experience was that we got to visit each other's countries. Now I'm able to say, like, oh, I have friends all the way on the other side of the world who I really care about, and I've had great memories with, and we learn together and have similar interests and passions.
Museums Connect is a terrific program that brings like-minded communities together to explore important issues that touch us all, such as climate change, women's empowerment, disability awareness, and civic engagement. People-to-people programs, like Museums Connect, are shaping a better future for everyone, especially young people all around the world.
For more than 30 years, the American Alliance of Museums has been extremely proud of its partnership with the U.S. State Department. Museums Connect advances the work of museums as bridges to diverse people, cultures, and heritage. In a world increasingly without borders and a greater reliance on interdependence, Museums Connect unites people and communities in the U.S. and around the world. This program fosters an understanding that, in spite of our differences, we have so much to unite us in facing our common challenges. Museums Connect also highlights the invaluable contribution that museums make in developing identity, community cohesion, empowerment, and empathy for all people and all times. Museums Connect amplifies AAM's belief that we are stronger together.
So when people ask you for more information about the program in general, I hope you'll find this is a good resource to point them towards to give a little overview for it. But that's telling the sort of wider story of AAM and AAM's Museum Connect partnership with us. But right now, I really did want to turn it over to Chanel and one of our young diplomats, Brianna Rather, to tell us their stories.
How's everyone doing? Good. Congratulations. Well, again, my name is Chanel Compton, and
I'm Brianna Rather.
So we're going to share with you our project that we did, implemented last year, A Journey Through the African Diaspora. And that project partnered the Museu Afro-Brazil with our museum, the Prince George's African American Museum. And both museums recruited local high school youth to research and explore the African diaspora, specifically the transatlantic slave trade and how that history shaped both communities. And a lot of people initially, when they were initially introduced to the project, they think of the transatlantic slave trade as only impacting African Americans in the US, but actually more enslaved Africans were sent to Brazil. So there is a huge opportunity for exploring shared history, art, and culture with the US and Brazil. All right. So the goals. The first goal was to foster a global dialogue between youth about their country's shared history of the transatlantic slave trade and how historical members groups in their communities organized and resisted institutionalized slavery and racism. Based on student research, develop innovative public art, ideas, and projects that educate communities about the African diaspora and their connection to it. The third is to create meaningful partnerships with global academic and community organizations to continue to expand the dialogue pertaining to the African diaspora. The fourth, of course, is to empower students by giving them more academic and cultural resources and the opportunity to exchange knowledge internationally. So a little bit about our two youth groups. Culture Keepers was one of the U.S. youth group, and Culture Keepers is a Prince George's African American Museum after-school program for students at Suitland High School in District Heights, Maryland. And Culture Keepers, in the Culture Keepers program, students learn about African American history, art, and culture through field trips, weekly workshops, and of course, international travel through this project. Ana Run Koja, which was the Brazil youth group, that was a new after-school program that was implemented in Brazil because of this grant. So after-school programming is very new to Brazil public schools. And in that group, they worked with the Museu Afro-Brazil for this project. Weekly workshops. So the activities in the program included weekly workshops where students took part in Skype sessions with students, educators from Brazil about the history, visual arts, and of course, language workshops, because there was obviously a language barrier. We speak English and Brazil speaks Portuguese, exactly.
So during our workshops, basically what we wanted to do was prepare ourselves for our trip to Brazil. We knew that the language barrier was probably going to be an issue, but during these workshops, we used a workbook to learn about the basics of the grammars, vocabulary that may be helpful for us when interacting with the Brazilian students, and also just basic pronunciation, so we wouldn't say anything wrong. These workshops really did help us.
And they took English-speaking workshops as well, so it was a great opportunity there. Field trips. So, both student groups engaged in field trips to different historical sites and cultural centers throughout their local area to learn about Afro history in their area. To the right are the students from Brazil, and they are learning about Luiz Gama, who was a famous Afro-Brazilian activist and writer. The culmination, so of course we have the international travel. So in April, Culture Keepers traveled to the Culture Keepers traveled to Brazil to work with the Museu Afro-Brazil and their peers, Ana Roncoja. And in May, Ana Roncoja and project coordinators came to the US to work with their US partners.
For me, I was super excited to travel because one, I'd never left the country, but another aspect of it was that it's one thing to learn about something in a book and to watch videos about how other people were impacted by traveling and learning about the African diaspora, but to actually go and witness, you know, firsthand, we actually got to tour different museums that were basically giving us, we were watching videos, and we were like, okay, yeah, that's nice. And then we actually went there, and we were like, this is real. Oh my gosh, these are real people. So I was really excited.
Yeah. I was excited too. Sharing and dialogue, which is really what this project is all about, right? So during the travels abroad, students took part in important discussions about their shared experience in the project and took part in discussions with community members. So to the left, we have Reverend Jerome Fowler, who's giving a discussion to the group from Brazil, and of course our group here, about his ancestor, Adam Francis Plummer, who was enslaved at the Riversdale estate. So there was a tremendous sharing opportunity there. And to the right, we have a photo of students talking to each other for the first time when we were in Brazil about their shared experience in the project and the impact that it had in their life.
So this wasn't our first, that was the first day that we had met them, but we had actually exchanged names and everything inside the building. But in the circle to the right, we were all sitting around and explaining, why we joined Culture Keepers and why they joined Ona Nkoja. One of the guys named Jonathan, I don't think you can see him in this picture, but he really, everything that he was saying really moved me. He was explaining to us why he joined Ona Nkoja, and prior to that, he didn't really consider himself to be Black or Afro-Brazilian, but after learning everything that he did when joining Ona Nkoja, he was like, oh, I'm very proud to be Black, and he couldn't wait to come to see the United States.
So. Yeah. Awesome. So public art. So while in both countries, students worked with artists to create public art that reflected their research. Here they're creating rubber stamps to be applied to a baobab tree, which is known in Africa as the tree of life. And that was just a portion of their installation. This is the final product that's permanently installed at the Museu Afro-Brazil in their workshop space. I take that back. It's installed on loan at the high school location, and it's coming back to the Museu Afro-Brazil for public view. This is the mural that we're working on at Suitland High School. And this is the final piece. So we have our group from Brazil and our group here at the mural unveiling. You can't see the end of it, but we incorporated the Brazilian and US flag. And that piece is actually installed at the Prince George's Public School building, and the dedication for that is October 14th. These are some of the activities that we had at our mural unveiling. We have Bisa Williams, who is the Assistant Secretary of African Affairs. She spoke at both mural unveilings. In Brazil, she lives in Bowie, and she spoke at our mural unveiling in Prince George's County, which was amazing. So in conclusion, students and everyone involved in this project, the families, community members, and museum staff, really worked together to make this project a success. Through collaborative planning and shared resources, we were able to create public art, create opportunities for students to travel and learn abroad, and we wanted them to connect to themselves, to each other, and of course to their culture.
Which we did. By participating in this project, I was really empowered. It definitely inspired me to think about other career options after high school and possibly other education options. I want to go to Georgetown, so I think one of my areas of interest would be public relations or possibly diplomacy. So participating in this project, I picked up another language and more information about a different culture. So now I can apply that to the real world and further study it once I go to college.
Thank you.
Great. have a quick question here? And if not, then we can just go ahead and go on and listen, and then we'll come to the end to questions to both of our panelists. How about? Okay.
I'm honored to represent the Empower Parents team, which includes my colleagues at Queens Museum, our Spanish partners at Museo Ico, and their cultural partner, Hablar en Arte, and a team of super parents of children with an autism spectrum disorder in both countries. The project's main objective is the promotion and creation by partners of a network to provide parents the tools and resources within museums and connection with other cultural organizations with the goal of social inclusion. As is the case with most museums, we enjoy research. So we actually we initiated the idea of using the museum to empower parents after we saw an opportunity at Queens Museum through Museums Connect to test a model for programming that was developed over 3 years through a previous grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This grant helped us to design art programming in community spaces for families affected by autism. Through Museums Connect, we were able to take this structure that we called Room to Grow, and it was adapted by our Spanish partners, which was really helpful in establishing a framework of values to guide our project. The first phase of the project was to create a bicultural task force. So lead parents and museum staff in both countries traveled to Spain and the US to experience how the diagnosis affected families in their partner country and what cultural institutions, educational programs, and community-based organizations were doing to help advance their children's educational and social goals. The Spanish museum professionals often worked in isolation to provide opportunities in museums for people with disabilities. And in both countries, parents were rarely asked what they wanted from museums in terms of access initiatives. No one had really considered inviting parents to the table to discuss their needs. So this was something that we started to notice during our trips and the exchanges that we had both in the US and Spain. Something that we know in working with families that have children with an autism spectrum disorder is in a lot of the research, you'll notice that advances in research and treatment of autism has deep roots in creative interventions by parents. So it was important from the project start to celebrate parents as first teachers and incorporate their recipes for success from the kitchen table. At first, this approach shocked the Spanish families involved in the programs because the cultural perception on disabilities is that professionals, not parents, know best. In Spain, parents are trapped in an educational system that does not lead with the goal of social inclusion. And in Queens, although parents have significantly more input in their child's education, it's a long and lonely uphill climb because the education, treatment, and definition of their child's diagnosis is constantly changing. So the question for us was, how can cultural institutions empower parents to be first teachers when they're accustomed to constant professional input on how to speak and interact with their children with special needs? What we did was, we did what we know, and we worked from the identity of artists as maker, and we decided to just train them to be makers. So we trained them to be designers, educators, and advocates. The following video is going to demonstrate what it looks like when an American museum and a Spanish museum invite a team of mom and dads to be the cooks in the kitchen.
You made it. All right. Our friends and what's the first word of the song? Hello, children. Hola, niños. How are you? ¿Cómo estás? Very well, and thank you. Muy bien, gracias. our seats because we're going to be landing in New York.
Thank you. So as you can see, a lot of activity was happening. And although it was a small selection of families that participated in the programs, we invited them to invite whomever they wanted into the group. So many times you'll find cousins coming in or neighbors, and the same was true in Spain as well. And many of the local cultural institutions, as soon as they heard about the project, asked if they can come and observe programming. So, so the Empower parents were invited to the table of discussion of how they can better reach their audiences that had children with disabilities. So I'm happy that Jacqueline Moore, who is one of our Empower parents, is here to talk about the experience that she had as a lead parent.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Moore, and I'm here to talk about my experience with the Empower Parents program. I am the mother of two wonderful boys named Max, who is 11, and Sebastian, who is 4. Max was diagnosed with autism when he was 22 months old. His hobbies include running, soccer, swimming, surfing, piano, snowboarding, and of course, art. Keeping up with Max and keeping him engaged in activities where people can provide for special needs children is a full-time challenge. But I'm a strong advocate that our kids need to experience what every typical child should experience. Being engaged as a critical part of the Empower Parents programming, along with a team of collaborating parents, has been amazing. We have learned that families around the world are facing the same challenges and can work together to contribute meaningful solutions when and if given the platform to do so. Empower Parents provides just that critical platform. But what makes this program so unique and what needs are being met? For starters, Empower Parents creates safe spaces. Parents of special needs children are very apprehensive about going into museums because we're concerned that our kids are going to tantrum. For us, the Queen's Museum has been a safe space to go to and to feel comfortable. No matter what, there is another parent that is watching your child. It is okay when your child cannot keep up or decides to have a tantrum. As parents, we are used to that. I think pilot projects like this program should be in museums all across the country. We need relevant cultural and community centers where our children can be accepted for who they are and embraced. And the Queen's Museum is a shining example of this. Empower Parents also provides a new way of engaging. I think that it is very critical to continue providing opportunities for socialization and engagement to the special needs community. Museums are a great venue for the sharing of resources, engaging in creative ways, educating through art and culture. We can create more opportunities for art to inspire social interaction and to build peer groups in a community that famously struggles to do so. Empower Parents also means what the name implies. It is a unique program in that it is a grassroots from bottom to top. I came to realize that there is a real disconnect between programming decisions and the special needs families. More effort needs to be made to involve parents and ask, what is it that you need to make this a meaningful experience for you and an impactful program? Family networking has also been a huge element of the program for us. Looking back now, it is hard to imagine that we really didn't have any connections with the other parents in the group before getting involved. We quickly bonded while planning lesson plans, creating materials, and working together to create memorable experiences for our kids. The group formed a strong collective of extremely committed parents and project coordinators. Families affected by special needs often feel isolated and alone, and it is incredibly powerful to feel as though there are other people in your immediate community that face the same challenges that you do. Parents collaborating and connecting can lead to invaluable information sharing and support. Empower Parents International. Taking these lessons and this program to the international level was incredibly inspiring. Our issues aren't just local to us, they are global. We had the opportunity to visit Madrid, Spain, meet Spanish families, and visit all the major museums. Our itinerary was quite jam-packed with activities. The museums wanted to connect with us on the issue of disability and access and were eager to hear about the project. I especially enjoyed a description from one museum professional that referred to the parents as parent professionals. In Spain, we witnessed amazing open studios for the disabled, intensive photography resources, and classes at social centers for the public that really emboldened people with disabilities to engage with the typical mainstream community. Their only setback seemed to be that they focused mostly on adults, and they all did their things individually, never thought of collaborating. They all existed like islands. Our museum meeting was their first collaborative meeting of the minds about disability ever. We hope they continue. Families in different regions were not connecting through social networks because they didn't know what they could create. They didn't know what to ask for. It took some time for them to open up and trust, but once they experienced our programs, they were really amazed at what we were capable of creating. We showed them a need for community and a value to have a network of parents with the same issues. They were not alone. They were very eager to participate, and when the Spanish families visited a class and session, they were amazed to see how well it went. We used technology to interact in the classrooms with the Spanish families. It was really amazing to see our kids come to understand Spain. Since our kids have not traveled internationally, it was such an abstract concept for them. We created many teaching opportunities for them to learn about travel and the cultural nuances between the US and Spain. We were not alone. In conclusion, think local, act global. No family affected by special needs sits on an island in isolation. We are all sharing common experiences and can learn a great deal from each other across oceans, continents, and time zones. Again, we can work together to create meaningful solutions when given the platform to do so. Empower Parents provides that critical platform. We are proud and grateful to be part of such a project. My personal impact, this project has had a powerful impact on my life. I am now a grad student at Hofstra University studying art therapy. I have learned a great deal through this experience and hope to learn more about combining psychology with arts to help the special needs community. I was also thrilled to create a series of classes. I'm a graphic designer and artist, so I created an art group called Creative Spectrum Art Social, and the Queens Museum was gracious enough to allow me the space to have supplies and have a monthly group meeting, and I was working with children with special needs from age 3 to 12, and we were working on larger art projects and murals to engage more socially with each child to create art. Thank you.
So the project definitely made an impact on many of us, and Jackie is actually, a really great example of one of many great stories about the project. So one of the questions that we had was about sustainability of the project, and so that was something that we were asked to think about from the very beginning, and we're thrilled to share in what ways the project will continue. During the second phase of the project, we launched a website, Empower Parents Net, which is a workspace to connect parents of children with autism with other interested stakeholders on resource development for accessibility within museum environments. Parents are given full access to our cultural network, and for museum professionals, access to collaborators is tremendously important. Our final sort of event culminated at the U.S. Embassy in Madrid, where we were welcomed, and it was over 40 representatives from different cultural institutions, community-based organizations, and even businesses who were interested in expanding the project in Spain. And they received the invitations like on a Wednesday, and the event was on Monday, and we had a packed house. It was pretty incredible, and everyone was asked to think about what they could do as an individual right now with their organization or with their own skill set to support the families in Spain. The Spanish General Department of National Museums invited other cultural institutions across the country to join the virtual network and is receiving tremendous support from the country's most important institutions like El Museo del Prado, Reina Sofia, and El Museo Thyssen. The The group will also be assisting in a museum's initiative for inclusion called Museums More Social. And the Queens Museum also is going to continue the program with funding that was raised by parents, which includes Max, Jackie's son, who ran the Achilles Race for Hope and Possibilities and raised over $1,600 just for the project itself.
5 miles.
5 miles, sorry, 5 miles. And also, finally, the Empower Parents project is going to continue to make an impact on the Queens Museum's social culture of the museum and their new public library space after inspiring a grant for over $150,000 from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to adapt the project for greater impact to visitor services in order to be accessible to the diversity of families of young children in Queens, one of the most diverse counties where over 169 languages are spoken. In my own life now, in my new role as Director of Community Programming at the Children's Museum of the Arts in Soho, we've saved a seat for Empower Parents as advisors to another initiative called Arts for All, which will provide staff training and support for the inclusion of families of children with special needs across programming. I think that advocacy from the perspective of a maker is the greatest takeaway for individuals who face physical and psychological barriers to resources in cities like New York and Madrid, who are known for their rich histories and cultures. Museums honor makers, and that's something that we can use for empowerment. And makers are creative problem solvers, which is an excellent ingredient in public diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your stories with us. I can tell you again on behalf of the American embassies and consulates that you've interacted with and will interact with that we are so very thankful. I actually heard from the Cultural Affairs Officer in Madrid just last week about how this program is continuing and what a great opportunity it provided to open a dialogue on an important topic for them there and give people a reason to come together and start comparing notes and to bring things forward. And the same thing with you. Thank you so much, because we have heard from Brazil, we heard before you came, before you went out, we heard after you got back, that this is just exactly the kind of opportunity that they too want to support in building these connections and such. So thank you very much. Well, we look forward to hearing more about your projects when we talk out there, and I would just like to give a final shout out for this whole notion of sustainability and continuing to keep projects alive through all the different connections that you built up. I know I've been so impressed at all the things that have continued to come out of past projects. Things like the Lincoln Park Zoo creating a mobile app that lets students continue to be researchers and biologists in their own home communities, that's translated and in place in many different countries around the world. They're from a project they did with Niger and Denmark years ago, and a project that introduced people in Philadelphia who went through the airport to the kind of civic engagement that was continuing to go on in Afghanistan as a follow-up project to a project there years ago. And if you do look online, you'll find all sorts of digital histories that are still alive today on things such as Muslim identity and an international women's project looking at how different women's voices across different cultures, and especially in the Islamic faith, have in common and what they have differently. And these are things that are just kind of continuing to resonate and keep all these great seeds that you're planting alive. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you. And in fact, I'm going to turn it back over right now to John because he's got something else to say.
Thank you so much. What magnificent projects, really. And Brianna, I think you said something, Brianna, that was really profound. You said, you just can't get this in a book. It really is. It's something about the magic of museums and the magic of these kinds of exchanges, that they transcend the written word and they create experience that are deeply moving and meaningful in the long term. Thank you so much. In addition to these two wonderful projects, we're also here today to celebrate 9 new projects that are just beginning their work in changing people's lives. I'd like to recognize these projects now, so if you will, participants, please stand when I call your institution's name and remain standing until everyone's been introduced and we can all applaud you together. The Monterey County Agricultural and Rural Life Museum is partnering with the Casa Canich Children's Museum in Honduras. The Patricia and Philip Frost Museum of Science in Miami is partnering with the Natural History Museum in Jamaica. The Jane Addams Hull House Museum of Chicago is partnering with the Krang Ta Chan Community Peace Learning Center in Cambodia. The Bell Museum of Natural History at the University of Minnesota is partnering with the Corporación Parque Explora of Colombia. The North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences is partnering with the Paleontology Museum of Mexico, as well as the Bombay Natural History Society. The Fabric Workshop and Museum in Philadelphia is partnering with the Tangier American Legation Institute for Moroccan Studies. And the Academy of Natural Sciences of Drexel University is partnering with the National Museum of Mongolia. The Pearl S. Buck House in Pennsylvania, partnering with the Pearl S. Buck Museum in China. The Clay Center for the Arts and Sciences of West Virginia is partnering with the Alexandru Stefanescu Gorj County Museum of Romania. And please join me in congratulating all of the 2014 Thank you, thank you. You can be seated. And just if you'll allow me just a few more words, on behalf of the American Alliance of Museums, I'd like to thank the U.S. State Department for supporting this important educational exchange and for its leadership in cultural diplomacy around the world. I'd also like to thank the Office of Congressman Shaka Fatah for securing this room so that we could all be here today. And before concluding, allow me to recognize the great work of Ford Bell, the president of AAM, who couldn't be with us here today. I'd also like to recognize our Alliance partners from the Association of Art Museum directors, Anita DeFanis and Andy Fincher, here with us today. And I'd like to recognize the staff of both the American Alliance of Museums as well as the U.S. Department of State. Please stand if you're on our staffs. Thank you for your good work. Thank you. If you're with a congressional office and you're looking for your constituents, the staff members would be happy to help. But everyone now, please join me outside this room for a special reception honoring this year's participants, and thank you for honoring us today with your presence. Well done. Very nice.
Thank you.